So the new ZCC, which we spoke about very recently, which is started by one guy who calls himself something Barnabas, uh, is now starting to have issues with the old ZCC. Now, I wanted to point this particular story out, or this particular thing, because it's quite interesting when we were talking about the subject matter of people defining what the Bible actually says, something that we were also talking about yesterday. To say sometimes people get into a church, they only choose to believe what's been said in the church without looking at what actually the Bible says. Now, this is an example of it, and this is what his issues are here. What's going on in ZCC? So he says when he was having battles, like court battles with the bishop, I don't know what court battles those are. If you do know, do alert us. Because of me, not to enjoy yeah. I stood up, a victim, just I'm okay. History will record, history will prove me right. Now, history will prove him right. Now, we don't even know what history is talking about. That's what I'm saying. I'm very interested in knowing what is he talking about exactly. So if you do know, holla at yours truly on WhatsApp to tell me exactly what thingy. And I know that churches like ZCC, there are things that will come up in the media that they will not have people know about. That will just go under the radar and you'll just never hear about it. So I'm interested in knowing what battles is that. We never saw anything like that. Amen. So red will always remain red. White will remain white. It won't change. Yeah. Notice he says when you address the errors in the church, and he spoke about husband, wife going to the farm. I don't know what that is all about. Is there a rule about that? Highlight. He says when you try to highlight the errors in the church, they try to kind of like shadow it. Now, this is one of the things that I did mention first. It's a very secretive church. And they try to pretend as if what are you talking about? We don't know what you're talking about. We've been there. And the ignorance of the secrecy not being there, like I made a video talking about sacred doctrine. People were treating me as if I am the one who's crazy. I'm like, guys, the secretive doctrine is a real thing. When Oliseng was speaking, people said, no, he was just a musician. No, even after they claimed that he was not a part of the church and whatnot and stuff like that, the man was still talking about things that high-ranking ZCC members actually believe. So they will dismiss it, especially the average person who just has not studied that much or asked that many questions, will never acknowledge the two sides of doctrine and thinking. When you talk about the errors that he is highlighting here, they will never acknowledge that there's errors. He's had errors and he's corrected it, and now he's been vocal about it. We can't go to a church, and when you get there, it's like it's a camp, soldiers' camp. South Africa is COVID-19. Guys, so you ask yourself for now, so he's asking about this issue of them not being open yet. What laws are they now running under? Not longer in the church's thingy. Then he says, but Khanya, the business which they have to sell products, that's the one thing that's open. And so he's pretty much aware of. And the person who's recording says, yeah, it's true. That's why, so the business is opened, but the church is not open. Now, This is what I wanted to point out. The video here that I'm watching is posted by Solo. Okay, I'll leave the video down in the description below. This is the deception that a lot of churches like ZCC and whatnot, because they have a sacred doctrine. They believe in sacred doctrine. It's things that the average person is not allowed to talk about. So a person like me talking about it, it can offend them, even though they know very well. Madam Speaker on TikTok questioned this thing to say, because of sacred doctrine, there are ZCC people that do not want to be vocal, or they don't want to hear people being vocal about certain things in the church. But that does not dismiss the errors that even ZCC people can see. But what is it that causes people to do this? It's because sacred doctrine. A church that has two doctrines. One doctrine that is for the goem is the average person. And this particular term goem comes from Freemasonry and so forth. It's held up high by people that believe in sacred doctrine. When you go against, if you listen to Madam Speaker's video, she speaks about this particular thing of people saying, no, you will die if you speak against the church. What is that? It's a church that has sacred doctrine. It is not a church doctrine that speaking against a leader of a church, you should die. But why is it that ZCC believes it? It's because there is sacred doctrine that being observed has those kind of ritualistic aspects where you cannot question authority figures. It's not church doctrine. It's sacred doctrine that causes that. On the second episode, we'll explore this particular thought. It's Ricky. I'll be back later on in the afternoon.